from California, do you think about the discrimination against the Hispanic community? For the women in this class, do you think about the discrimination, about gender discrimination? For the very few African Americans in this class, do you think about the hundreds of years of slavery our ancestors were subject to, and how in many ways that fight is still going on today? I think about all of it. Why not? Discrimination has occurred since long before the first written record, and it will continue to occur until we as a people stop using our ignorant, biased, unenlightened, judgmental, self-righteous opinions to govern our land. I often have to remind myself not to get frustrated with our adolescent nation. After all, we're only about 500 years old, less if you count the official years post the beginning of civilized colonies. I often have to remind myself to be patient with our youthful way of thinking. The colonization of our land is a direct result of pillage and plunder and the near genocide of the natives of the land. Those that are remaining, forced to live on reservations with separate rights, separate laws, separate government sanctions. I have to remind myself not to get angry with our childish tantrums that even to this day are causing people of this great country to inflict laws, amend Constitution, and outright ban the civil liberties of others. Picketing, bullying, hate crimes. This is how we solve our problems. Discrimination isn't over yet. The last 160 years has been nothing but one big civil rights movement, beginning with women's rights and the feminist movement, followed by what we know as the civil rights movement, referring to African Americans, followed by the gay agenda, which is happening right now. Three very different groups of people have some very fundamental principles in common. They are human beings. They live in this country. They differ from what society says is normal. Bear with me for just a moment while I give you some important names and dates to highlight the efforts of the civil rights movement. Susan B. Anthony. Some of you may only know her from the coin, but she is a frontrunner of the national women's suffrage movement along with Elizabeth Cady Stanton. These two women are personally responsible for women to have rights over their children, granted first by the state of New York in 1860. Together, these women and many others advocated for the right to vote, control over property and wages, the right to go to college, and the right to birth control, a right we as women did not get until 1923. Compliments of Margaret Sanger. It took more than 50 years of advocating until rights were finally granted. August 26, 1920, the 19th Amendment granted women the right to vote. Lloyd, I think you'll appreciate this one. June 10, 1963, Congress passed the Equal Pay Act, which is self-explanatory. Continuing on, July 26, 1948, President Truman signs an executive order mandating equal treatment for all persons in the armed services without regard to race, color, religion, or national origin. 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education, the desegregation of schools. 1956, desegregation of public buses, compliments of Rosa Parks. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, that we are still abiding by today, was signed by President Johnson. It prohibits discrimination of all kinds based on race, color, religion, national origin, or sex. A little side note. If it wasn't for the persistent lobbying of Alice Paul, the woman who continued as the head of the women's suffrage movement post the deaths of Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, sex would not have been added to that decree. And finally, June 12, 1967, Loving versus the state of Virginia. Whites are now allowed to marry non-whites without it being considered unconstitutional. Now that you have big dates, I won't bore you with the details. I won't tell you the stories of the many women who were jailed, raped, and beaten while advocating for their rights. I won't go into details about the lynch mobs sent out after African Americans who were lobbying for theirs. I won't talk about the assassinations of Dr. King and Malcolm X. I won't talk about how it wasn't until the O.J. Simpson case in the mid-1990s that the justice system was finally an even playing field for black men. No, I won't talk about those things. What I will talk about are the hate crimes against homosexuals. Harvey Milk, assassinated in 1978 by a former policeman for being the first open gay politician who openly advocated for homosexual rights. This happened in San Francisco, a place where you can't walk a block without seeing rainbow runners and people walking gaily through the streets. Matthew Shepard, a 22-year-old man who was murdered in 1998 because he too was openly gay. 2010, Bronx, New York. A 30-year-old man was lured to a home under the guise of a party. He bought alcohol and was ready for a good time. What he got was not a party, but hours hours of being tied up, beaten, tortured, and sodomized with a small baseball bat. This came after 2 other young men admitted to having sex with him after being tortured and sodomized with plungers. Rutgers University, a guy sets up a webcam, records his roommate having sex with another man, and streamed it on the internet. The roommate committed suicide. Teenagers all over the country are taking their own lives to escape the bullying from their peers, the constant judgment for being who they are, and the fear of disappointing their disapproving parents. When is it going to be enough? When are we as a people going to let people be who they are? Homosexuals are not aliens. Homosexuals are not green with tentacles. Homosexuals don't come out at night and drink our blood, although I bet if they did, it would be more acceptable. You can't cure being a woman, although Chad Bono and countless others have tried. You can't cure being black, although Michael Jackson tried. You can't cure being gay, but that doesn't stop churches from trying. Whether you're having a sex change operation, bleaching your skin, or having a heterosexual life with a legal marriage, the white picket fence, 2 dogs, and 3 kids, it doesn't mean that you are changing who you are. September 20th, 2011, homosexuals are finally allowed to serve openly in the military. This came only after thousands had been dishonorably discharged while fighting for our rights to judge them. In many states, same-sex couples are not allowed to adopt any of the hundreds of thousands of children that need good homes. Why? Because they can't love or care or nurture or feed or clothe or educate that child the way a man and woman can together? Give me a break. Same-sex couples want the right to raise children just as heterosexuals have the right not to. Gay marriage is only legal in 6 states: New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Iowa. 6 states out of 50. When will the rest of the country follow? Not until the federal government does something. But thanks to Bill Clinton and the Defense of Marriage Act, which defines marriage solely between a man and a woman, and states that the states are responsible for making their own choices, we're a long way from that happening. Marriage aside, can we start with acceptance? Can we start with equality? Can we start with ending our infringement on the civil liberties of people just being people? Here's a riddle for you. What does Bank of America, Chase, Lexus, Dell, Prudential, American Airlines, Shell, Chevron, BP, Citi, Microsoft, and Google all have in common? Give up. These are just a few of the many corporations that have partnered with the Human Rights Campaign to take a stance against the unlawful, unjust, undeserved discrimination against the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender community. With more than 1 million members, the Human Rights Campaign is advocating at every level possible for equality. The No Hate Campaign, launched in 2008 after Proposition 8 amended California's constitution to ban same-sex marriage. It is a silent photographic protest featuring more than 13,000 pictures of people, from everyday citizens to actors to musicians to politicians. They pose, dressed in white, with duct tape across their mouths, no hate written on their faces, and some kind of gesture symbolizing an end. An end to hate, an end to fear, an end to injustice. Separate but equal no longer applies to women. Separate but equal no longer applies to African American. Separate but equal barely alludes to the rights homosexuals don't have. Senator Edward Kennedy said this in 2008. Civil rights is still the unfinished business of America. Prejudice, discrimination, and outright bigotry continues to limit the lives of large numbers of our people. If history is doomed to repeat itself, as it usually is, then this fight for equality is just beginning. My name is Masherie Dunbar. I have served faithfully in the Air Force for nearly 10 years. I have served 2 combat deployments in Iraq. I am your classmate, and to some, I am your friend. I am a woman, I am black, I am gay. Will you hate me too?